April 2025. In just 30 days, China's export orders dropped across three major sectors: electronics, plastics, apparel. The cause wasn't one policy, it was three. First, U.S. tariffs surged, some categories now taxed at 145%. Second, the Chinese yuan strengthened, cutting exporters' price advantage overnight. Third, cross-border payments in yuan failed. Buyers reverted to U.S. dollars. Together, they formed a triangle, not of trade, but of trauma. In Yiwu, a sock factory closed before Labor Day. In Dongguan, toy shipments were delayed indefinitely. In Ningbo, port workers watched containers sit untouched for weeks. None of it made the news. Only the slogans did. Global recovery, resilience, high-quality development. But on the factory floor, it felt like something else. 3 cuts. No blood, just silence. China's export slowdown wasn't caused by a single blow. It was a triple cut, delivered almost simultaneously. Blade 1, tariffs. In March 2025, the U.S. raised duties on key Chinese imports: electronics, plastics, household goods. Some items now face up to 145% in combined federal and state-level tariffs. This wasn't a surprise. It was a signal. The message to importers was clear. Buy elsewhere. American retailers responded. Orders were pulled. Warehouses paused. Contract renewals stalled. By early April, electronics exports from Shenzhen dropped 21% year-on-year. Toy shipments from Guangdong fell 17%. The engine sputtered. Blade 2, the yuan. While exports dropped, Beijing allowed the yuan to strengthen. From 7.42 to 7.22 against the US dollar in just 3 weeks. A 2.7% rise. That may seem small, but for exporters working on razor-thin margins, it was fatal. A furniture exporter in Foshan put it simply, "We price everything in USD. If the yuan gets stronger, we lose profit with every shipment." Some canceled production entirely. Others tried renegotiating with buyers. Most were turned down. Blade 3, the payment wall. Even if a deal survived tariffs and currency shifts, many couldn't get paid. Several Southeast Asian and Middle Eastern buyers reported failed settlements in yuan. Banks held transactions for extra review. Compliance departments flagged them. Delays turned into cancellations. Some reverted to dollars. Others walked away. China's dream of globalizing the yuan hit a wall, and the cost fell squarely on exporters. When asked why the shift happened, one importer in Dubai answered coldly, "No one wants to explain a payment delay to their board." Together, the three blades formed a choke. Tariffs cut access. Currency crushed price. Payment failures collapsed trust. Each problem made the next worse. Each policy reinforced the other's damage. And none had a clear off switch. The illusion of resilience faded fast. Factories stood still. Shipping slowed. Even domestic confidence eroded. And Beijing stayed silent, because to fix one blade meant pulling on the other two. Let the yuan fall, risk capital flight. Ease payment rules, risk sanctions. Negotiate tariffs, lose face. So instead, they chose nothing. And the exporters? They got cut. China promised the world it was ready. Ready for tariffs. Ready for currency shocks. Ready to lead global trade. That was the narrative. But in the spring of 2025, that story cracked. The government said, "We are opening new markets. Domestic consumption will carry growth. The yuan is strong because the economy is strong." But none of that was true. Export markets were shrinking. Domestic demand was flat. And the yuan was being propped up manually. The central bank intervened to hold the line. Cross-border capital controls were tightened. Exchange flows were monitored hourly. Behind the image of control was panic. Why? Because China's export model wasn't built for this kind of stress. It wasn't built for sudden tariff walls. It wasn't built for a rising local currency. And it wasn't built for a world that no longer wanted to transact in yuan. The state media ignored this. Instead, they pointed fingers. Western pressure. U.S. containment. temporary headwinds. But what if the headwind was internal? What if the real damage came not from what others imposed, but from what Beijing refused to admit? The triad of pain, tariffs, currency, and payment blockage wasn't coordinated by Washington. It was enabled by China's own response, or rather its lack of one. Letting the yuan rise didn't stop capital flight. It just crushed exporters. Blocking international payment tools didn't protect sovereignty. It isolated partners. Refusing to revise tariffs didn't show strength. It showed fear. China wasn't defending its economy. It was defending a mask of stability, a mask of resilience, a mask of control. But behind it, a country choking itself, one policy at a time. On paper, it looked like chaos. Tariffs went up. The yuan climbed. Cross-border yuan payments stalled. Exporters collapsed. But what if this wasn't a chaotic response? What if it was a strategic decoupling, engineered from the outside and accelerated from the inside? Over the past 5 years, U.S. trade strategy has shifted. Not to defeat China, but to route around it. Step by step, Washington used tools that didn't look like weapons, but functioned like them. Tariffs were the pressure valve. Currency manipulation warnings were the leash, and dollar supremacy the hidden choke. At the same time, the U.S. restructured global sourcing. Vietnam signed fast-track export agreements. Mexico entered deep-tier supply chain integrations. India gained preferred status for electronics assembly. None of these moves were loud. They were administrative, technical, surgical. The result? China was still open, but less needed. Still exporting, but less trusted. Still loud, but no longer central. This is where the yuan came in. When Beijing pushed for internationalization of its currency, it assumed partners would follow. But the opposite happened. Russia demanded oil payments in yuan, then reversed course. Brazil agreed to settle in CNY, then hedged with USD. Pakistan launched a yuan settlement pilot, then paused it quietly. Why? Because Beijing couldn't back the one thing all trade needs: unrestricted access. Instead, they imposed currency windows, cross-border vetting, geopolitical clauses. This wasn't a financial network. It was a geopolitical filter. And businesses don't like filters. The more China insisted on sovereign finance, the more the world turned to predictability. And predictability still wears stars and stripes. So when the yuan rose in April, when exporters were squeezed, when ports filled but orders froze, it wasn't an accident. It was a checkmate, a culmination of quiet isolation. One partner at a time, one contract at a time, one rerouted shipment at a time. The blades? They didn't all come from the West. Some were handed over by Beijing, sharpened by silence, and buried deep into the spine of its own export machine. This wasn't war. This was exit. And China was left watching the door close from the inside. At first, it was the quotes. Exporters in Yiwu opened their inboxes and saw silence. Clients in the US didn't respond. European buyers canceled purchase orders. Middle Eastern distributors asked to postpone payment. Then came the math. The tariffs added 30 to 40% overnight. The yuan got stronger, shaving off 3% margin instantly. And when final invoices were issued, payments in CNY failed or stalled. Some clients asked to switch to US dollars. Some never replied again. Then came the layoffs. A mid-sized plastic parts factory in Wenzhou cut 60% of its workforce. A shoe supplier in Quanzhou shut down all exports. A textile firm in Jiangsu suspended operations until global conditions improve. Employees were told to wait at home. But no wages came. No return date given. Workers left. Some went back to the countryside. Others stayed, looking for gig jobs. Dormitories emptied. Company canteens reduced to 2 meals a day. Lights went out, first in the side buildings, then in the main hall. Then came the service collapse. Freight forwarders saw their contracts dry up. Truckers had fewer routes. Port operators began rotating shifts to cut cost. Warehouses in inland provinces received shipments that never moved again. Stacks of unsold stock built up. Insurance firms quietly stopped covering long-term container delays. Even packaging firms, label printers, and pallet suppliers saw orders vanish. Then came the personal consequences. A 26-year-old machine operator in Dongguan moved back with his parents. His wife, 3 months pregnant, lost her job at a LED plant the same week. In Nanchang, a taxi driver reported more passengers leaving the city than arriving. When asked where they were going, most just said, home. A kindergarten in Fuzhou closed midterm. Not enough children. Too many parents pulling out. Then came the numbers nobody could print. Youth unemployment, already sky-high, went unreported. PMI data dipped below 50. Shipping volumes dropped. Consumer sentiment fell, but state media cited temporary headwinds. On social media, the term Thundal Lanjan, three-blade execution, began appearing in memes. It was quickly censored, but screenshots spread. Then came the withdrawal. Foreign firms shifted sourcing away. Not loudly, just steadily. U.S. brands placed bulk orders in Vietnam. EU automotive firms ramped up output in Mexico. Japanese retailers locked in new suppliers in Thailand. One logistics consultant put it plainly, they didn't announce their exit. They just stopped sending Excel sheets. Then came the policy freeze. Beijing didn't cut the yuan, didn't suspend tariffs, didn't ease payment controls. No one dared blink first, because admitting pain would trigger panic. Admitting isolation would invite speculation. Admitting failure would tear the mask. So the policies stayed. The blades held firm. And the blood kept leaking quietly, invisibly. But the damage? It's no longer economic. It's systemic. Factories lost workers. Workers lost hope. Families lost income. And the country lost time it won't get back. No bombs fell. No sanctions were declared. No factories were burned. And yet, China's export engine is bleeding. Not because someone attacked, but because 3 knives were left in, and no one pulled them out. Tariff wall, a tightening currency, a payment system that locks itself from within. Each cut deeper than the last. Each meant to show strength. Each proving the opposite. Now the factories are dark. The workers are gone. And the headlines still smile. But deep inside the system, you can hear it. The sound of something choking. Slower, quieter, more final. So ask yourself, when a nation claims control while cutting off its own breath, is that sovereignty? Or is that a suicide it refuses to name?